Salam, dear friends. I'm Erik Gustafson, Executive Director for Enabling Peace in Iraq Center. Welcome to our latest special Iraq briefing on the ongoing war on Iran and its impact in Iraq. Today is day 151 of the war, and our focus is Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi's Balancing Act. As the war enters its 6 months with no clear end in sight, Iraq is feeling the pressures on multiple fronts: security, oil and gas production, electricity, diplomacy, and public finances. The Kurdistan region has faced repeated drone and missile attacks. Companies are again suspending production, and electricity shortages are sparking protests. At the same time, Iraq is facing a deeper sovereignty problem. Zaidi is trying to act as the head of a central government, but his room to maneuver is being undercut by Iran-backed militias that operate inside Iraq's political and security system. So what is Zaidi trying to achieve as he moves between Washington, D.C., Tehran, Doha, and soon Ankara? Can his diplomacy protect Iraq from being consumed by a war it cannot control? And with Iraq's oil-dependent revenues under growing pressure, is Baghdad running out of time? To help us make sense of all of this, I'm joined by my colleague, Omar Al-Nidawi, EPIC's Director of Programs and Research and editor of our weekly Iraq Security and Humanitarian Monitor. Omar, so the ceasefire agreement has collapsed. Nearly all of the agreement's 14 points have been violated. So let's start with the latest round of fighting. On the surface, things are looking a little calmer right now, calmer than a few days ago, but the situation is still extremely unstable. How is this latest phase of the US-Iran war affecting Iraq and the Kurdistan region, militarily, economically, and politically?
Hi, Eric. It's good to join you again. Unfortunately, things have been bad the last couple of weeks. The fighting between the US and Iran has been accompanied by a new wave of violence that has spilled over into Iraq, which reinforces the notion that Iraq is really a second front in this war. The violence manifested primarily in the Kurdistan region, where we have seen dozens of drones and missiles target various areas within the Kurdistan region, both in and around Erbil and Suleymaniye. Many of the drones and missiles have targeted camps and buildings affiliated with Iranian Kurdish opposition groups in various places of the Kurdistan region, resulting in dozens of casualties. But we've also seen many drones and missiles also approach or target the U.S. presence in the Kurdistan region, including the U.S. airbase near Erbil Airport and the U.S. consulate compound in Erbil City, as well as places in Suleymaniye. Many of the drones and missiles were shot down, but again, some of them did get through. We've seen several incidents of drones or munitions hitting places that appear to have been weapon depots because of the nature of secondary explosions that have been captured in footage. We've also seen a U.S. soldier actually die as a result of the attacks. It was an incident involving unexploded ordnance from one of the drones. And these attacks, which have, of course, reignited tensions and recriminations between the KRG and militias and the Iraqi government, have also had a direct economic impact on the region, on the Kurdistan region, and with ripple effects on Iraq, because several oil companies operating in the Kurdistan region have suspended their operations, including Dana Gas at the Khormor field. Today, they're announcing a plan to restart production, which is crucial for electricity generation in the Kurdistan region, but also some power plants that are operating within the within the jurisdiction of the federal government. So this has contributed to worsening electricity conditions and fuel shortages in the Kurdistan region. We have also seen tangible evidence of Iranian efforts to rebuild Iran's forward defense network, as we call it. So we've seen weapons shipments being hidden inside Iraqi fuel oil tankers that were moving from Iraq to Syria and allegedly heading towards Hezbollah in Lebanon. Those were intercepted by Syrian authorities last week. So Iran is still trying to use Iraq as a conduit for the transfer of weapon and resupply of Hezbollah. And in another concerning development this week, we also saw reports of Iran-backed Iraqi militias allegedly firing weapons, firing drones at Saudi Arabia and also Israel, placing Iraq once again as a combatant in this conflict. And in the meantime, the maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz remains largely stranded and stalled. And this has contributed to the continued collapse of oil revenue, of oil exports. Data from Iraq's finance ministry suggests that pretty much 99% of spending in the month of May went to just salaries, and capital expenditure has collapsed to about 87%, or by about 87% of what it was a year before. And data released today from SOMO, that's Iraq's oil marketing organization, confirms that oil exports during May and June averaged no more than 500,000 barrels per day, down from about 3.5 million barrels per day in the months before the war. So that's again, about an 85% collapse in oil exports and oil revenue. And at the same time, electricity shortages are worsening in Iraq and across multiple provinces. And during the summer months, this is a problem because temperatures soar to 120 degrees and beyond sometimes. So we've seen protests in multiple provinces in central and southern Iraq that have led to friction and clashes between protesters and security forces. So the situation is kind of tense as these two vital resources, money for salaries and electricity during the summer, are being largely restricted by the fallout from the war.
Wow, wow. A lot of developments that you're pointing to, and also like how the region is changing, how, previously under the Assad regime in Syria, Syria cooperated with Iran and would have very much allowed that flow of weapons to Hezbollah. Now the Syrian government is putting a stop to that, right, when they catch it. So
Right.
yeah, very, very interesting.
Interesting thing, but also a potential side effect is that the hijacking of the fuel oil trade to smuggle weapons could actually backfire on Iraq because it might increase Syrian scrutiny over this trade and complicate clearance requirements. It could delay it and restrict it at a time where Iraq is desperate to generate more income.
Yeah, yeah, very serious. I mean, economically, it's just unimaginable. It's funny, we all love to hate politicians, right? It seems to be a cottage industry, but I cannot imagine like any prime minister in a more difficult position than Prime Minister Ali Al-Zaidi right now. So, the Prime Minister Zaidi has now visited Washington D.C. and Tehran in quick succession. That balancing act that we spoke of, with stops and outreach involving Doha, Riyadh, and soon Ankara. What is he trying to achieve with this diplomacy, and what has he actually secured so far?
Well, it seems that the overarching goal is to get more economic cooperation with the United States, get more deals with the United States, and maybe allay some U.S. concerns about the issues of militias and corruption, and maybe reducing Iranian exploitation of Iraq's economic and power networks at the time of conflict. So we saw that reflected, I think, in the way the trips unfolded. The discussions in Washington were very concentrated on business and trade expansion and reintegrating Iraq within the international economy. So we've seen agreements on basically $60 billion worth of agreements between Iraq and U.S. energy companies, according to officials on both sides. These involve U.S. company involvement in rebuilding a pipeline from Iraq to the Mediterranean ports of Syria to export Iraqi oil, which is a big deal, perhaps the biggest outcome of these of this trip. There was also an agreement on a framework to remove restrictions on several Iraqi banks that have been prevented from doing international transactions through correspondent banks. And I think they include the bank that Zaidi himself was a chairman of. So
Al
seven Iraqi
Janubi,
banks. Hmm?
yeah, the Al Janubi
I
Bank, I
think the
believe.
yeah Al Janub Bank. So that could see the restrictions removed in a few weeks or a few months. We also saw, I think, a deals with ConocoPhillips to potentially get involved in the Akaz gas field in Anbar and to partner with the BP at Kirkuk. The visit was considered, I think, by a lot of observers as a win for Zaidi. Trump showered him with praise and compliments. He called him a great fighter. He said he won elections, even though he was not an elected official. Uh, People were, making remarks about Zaidi's management of Trump, how he won him over, and appeared to be uh, to project strength and independence in his meetings with Trump and other senior U.S. officials, and that was almost immediately. He spent about a week in the U.S. between Washington and Houston primarily, highlighting again the energy focus of the trip. But then immediately he went to Iran, and over there there were also several agreements that were signed between Iraq and Iran, but none of them were really as significant or as tangible as they were with the U.S. I think the biggest one was or the most significant one was an agreement to extend a railway connection between Kermanshah and Baghdad, and an agreement on transit of goods through border crossings, but nothing really of the magnitude that we saw in the U.S. So uh, I think the Iran trip appears more of a an attempt to console or to show solidarity with Iran, but the real meat and potatoes were in the trip to Washington. At the same time, we've seen you mentioned Doha and Riyadh. Um, Zaidi made a quick stop in Doha and he dispatched his foreign minister to Riyadh to discuss transit through the Strait of Hormuz, how to secure that, how to resume navigation, and also to provide assurances to Gulf states that there will be no tolerance for attacks on their territory from Iraq. But so much for that. Again, this week we've seen attacks, or renewed attacks by the militias on Saudi Arabia. And Zaidi actually is in Ankara today as we speak, and this one will be focused again, I think, on a lot of energy projects and transportation, with Iraq's development road project being, I think, top of the agenda, along with water sharing.
Yeah, yeah. Water diplomacy, crucial, especially with Turkey. Uh, so I mean, that's very interesting. It's almost as though right now Prime Minister Al-Zaidi is doing a pretty good job of putting Iran and the U.S. in competition with each other. Who's gonna who's gonna love us more? Who's gonna show more love? Right?
Yeah, yeah. He's trying to
um,
be friends with everyone, but
yes.
yeah, I
Yeah.
don't envy him.
Yeah, but I mean, what you speak to reminds us, I think, that Iran has always been a huge trading partner with Iraq. So a lot of these things have already been happening. But I thought what was interesting is because of the nature of some of the discussions with Tehran about these border crossings and more trade and a railway, that shortly afterwards, as I understand the time frame, and maybe you can correct me, there were attacks on some of the border crossings.
Have been several attacks on border crossings within the region. I think there were strikes on the Abdali border crossing, that's on the Kuwaiti side, by Iran. There were
Mm.
attacks by the U.S. on Iranian border crossings just across from Iraq. So they have been, I think, they have featured heavily in the fighting in the last couple of weeks. These are strategic points for uh, both Iran's ability to export goods, to maybe to move weapons, but this on the one side, but on the other side, I think Iran has been also trying to cut U.S. logistics line between Kuwait and Iraq. And at a time of war, logistics are everything.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, two issues are getting especially close attention right now. In a way, you could say that it's how the prime minister has started his premiership, kind of hallmarks of what he's going to be all about. And that's militia disarmament and corruption. So, what is the latest on those two fronts?
Well, not much. I think some symbolic moves, but not much substance. We have seen two sentences against current lawmakers among those who were targeted by the anti-corruption arrests. We have seen more gold and cash being seized, but we have not seen any new major arrests targeting any senior political figures or even really minor political figures for that matter. We have not seen any significant progress on disarmament of militias. We have not seen any weapons changing hands or any big announcements about specific plans for how Iraq plans to execute this ambitious plan. But we've seen the prime minister in while he was at the White House reaffirm the end of September deadline for disarmament to coincide with the departure of U.S. forces, of the remaining U.S. forces from Iraq. So the deadline is being reaffirmed, but not really much is happening on the ground. We saw a something that was that captured the headlines for a while: the seizure by security forces of a drone manufacturing uh, workshop in Baghdad that was supposedly manufacturing first-person view strike drones. These are short-range strike weapons that have been very ubiquitous, I think, in the Russia-Ukraine war, and are seeing more action in the Middle East. But there have been, while there were arrests in connection with that trade, the links and affiliations have not been exposed. We also saw a few arrests made in connection with the weapons smuggling, but again, the arrests were limited to the drivers who were moving the trucks, but no one has revealed anything about the people who, sent these drugs and the masterminds behind these operations. So again, the arrests are superficial so far. That said, we're seeing some political, perhaps, moves happening behind the scene in terms of Zaidi reshaping the leadership of several security agencies in Baghdad. So he replaced the commander of the counterterrorism service. He replaced the head of the Iraqi National Security Agency, and among other senior security officials. He has also, and this is a move that has been controversial, reestablished an entity called the Office of the Commander in Chief, kind of a controlling entity that answers to him, through which it was initiated, I think it was created by Nour al-Maliki back in the day, and was abolished in 2014 during the war with ISIS. And it was used by Malik at the time to bypass formal chains of command of the Interior Ministry and the Defense Ministry and just put everything under his direct control. Maliki notoriously was commanding things via text messages. Not not saying that Zaidi is trying to uh, copy Maliki's playbook, but it certainly has raised eyebrows in Baghdad about potential centralization of power at a time when the Interior Ministry and the Defense Ministry remain vacant. The leadership positions remain vacant because of the deadlock over completing the government formation.
Yeah, yeah. And with that office that's been created within Prime Minister's office, it just also reminds me during uh, Prime Minister Maliki's time, he also put a lot of his own people in power within the military establishment. That nepotism, which really diminished its effectiveness when ISIS swept across the country.
Correct. There was a lot of replacement of competent officers with loyalists. I hope that's not the case that we're seeing unfolding now.
Yeah,
Uh, hopefully there's some other explanation for it. But it definitely is raising questions about possible centralization of power.
So, looking across Prime Minister Al-Zaidi's diplomacy, the militia file, the campaign against corruption, and the economic pressure that Iraq is facing, what are your main takeaways, especially as the pressures are likely to intensify as the war drags on?
Well, I think we can't deny that there are some positives in the form of the pipeline agreement with Syria, with U.S. backing. This is I think, a big breakthrough, but it's one that will not materialize for several years in terms of translating the agreement into barrels on ships. I think there's also uh, there have been gains in the restrictions on Iraqi banks being removed, and in Zaidi building a very favorable relationship with Trump. But I think the short-term pressures are are there to stay, and they're not going away anytime soon. And there are going to be destabilizing. Zaidi is at risk of having overpromised and underdelivered when it comes to disarmament because he reaffirmed that deadline, but he still hasn't done anything on the ground to meet expectations, and that can be expensive when it comes to his credibility in this area. I think the same goes for the anti-corruption campaign. If um, uh, if it fizzles and we don't see the government follow through with dismantling of other corruption networks, and we this the process remains restricted to the very limited circles that it has targeted within the oil ministry and a couple political opponents, then that's also going to undermine the credibility of this campaign. Meanwhile, the security risks are not going away. I think this war with Iran entering its 6th month and observing the conduct of US leadership over the last few months, it seems more and more likely that the Trump administration is just digging a deeper hole without a clear idea for an exit. And the Iranians are exploiting that, and they seem to be gambling or betting that they can extract more concessions by dragging this conflict. It seems that they feel that they have more luxury of time than Trump does, and this is dangerous because this could drag on for a few more months, and that can be uh, if Iran and the U.S. can tolerate that much time. I don't think Iraq's internal conditions can withstand the pressure for that long. Again, we are about to enter August, which is the hottest month in Iraq, and we're already seeing signs that salaries are being delayed. And I think in anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, we're going to see electricity and finances begin to crumble in Iraq, and that can be very destabilizing for the country.
Yeah, and at the same time, Iran seems to be determined to continue to use Iraq as a conduit for spreading the fighting, logistics, transfer of weapons across Iraqi territory, and as well as the militias carrying out attacks, which makes Iraq a target, a belligerent in this conflict, and that's not in the best interest of a country of 48 million people, with the war prolonged, creating more and more economic chaos.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a big risk.
So, Omar, thank you so much. As always, you helped us see the connections between the headlines, the war on Iran, militia activity, Iraq's economy, energy pressures, and of course, the political choices facing Baghdad. For everyone watching, you can read our full weekly analysis in Epic's Iraq Security and Humanitarian Monitor, ISHM, at enablingpeace.org. We'll also continue posting these special Iraq briefings as long as the war on Iran continues, a war gravely harming Iraq and the region. If our briefings are useful to you, please subscribe to Epic's YouTube channel. Leave us a comment with questions, things that you'd like us to cover, and share this with others like you trying to understand how the war is affecting Iraq. Iraq is too often treated as a side note. We believe Iraq matters. Our goal is to keep Iraq in focus and to keep listening to the Iraqis working for peace, sovereignty, the environment, accountability, and a better, healthier future. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Erik Gustafson with Epic.
I'm Omar al-Nidawi.
We'll see you next time.
مع السلامة.